Don't you find it just a little bit bizarre that there is zero news media mention whatsoever of these two, that I can find at least, who start their trial today in Liverpool Crown Court? And I know that because I can look on CourtServe and it details what's going on and where all over the country. Now, this is before His Honour Judge Fluitt KC at 10:30 for trial this morning, Mohammed Ahmad and Mohammed AMAAZ. I understand from their conferences that they are running some sort of self-defense argument, but I'm not in court, so I won't know what's actually being run. It's likely that the prosecution arguments will probably open tomorrow with the swearing of the jury and everything today and initial arguments or whatever happening today. But when we look at the BBC here, this is Discovering the BBC for the UK. And we look at here, there's a warning about health alerts. There's this thing about Bob Villan, which I'll come back to a bit later in the video. The US must rule out strikes before new talks about Iran. A woman letting a girl under 10 drive her car through the village. And a few other things, but nothing on this page about this story that garnered so much attention last year. Likewise, Sky News, there's various stories on here, none of which relate to these two that are facing trial from today. Now, just as a reminder to anyone that decides to post anything, they have the right to a fair trial, and my comments on that will be limited because I am obviously not going to jeopardize this trial in any way whatsoever. But I do find it a little bit bizarre that there is no media mention of this whatsoever. Even when you just Google one of their names, there is nothing that comes up at all. When we click tools anytime within the last 24 hours, nothing at all comes up from any news outlet, whether news or otherwise, within the last 24 hours. Nothing. I find that really bizarre. But as I say, given it's a live trial, I cannot and I will not say any more, save that this is listed for 10:30 this morning. Moving to Bob Villan, the BBC now concedes that it should have pulled the feed, coming under pressure from Ofcom. As reported by The Telegraph, Ofcom investigates BBC over Glastonbury hate chant. Ofcom says the BBC clearly has questions to answer over Bob Villan and his chant "Death to the IDF." So coming back to the BBC, ironically reporting on itself, saying that it should have pulled this feed. Many have noted that there will be a short delay on live broadcasts so that if something happens, they can pull the feed and those few seconds don't actually go out on air. The organisers of Glastonbury reported to say that they are appalled by the comments, which they say crossed a line. BBC spokesperson said that the BBC respects freedom of expression but stands firmly against incitement of violence. Now, this obviously throws up again this debate between what is free speech and what is incitement of violence, and how do we treat these things together and separately? Because if one is said to be inciting violence, for example, Lucy Connolly prosecuted for what she posted online, ultimately then pleaded guilty, then it obviously stands to reason that if there is another statement or another comment made to a crowd or made to an audience that is on the face of it clearly incitement, those two should be at least prosecuted in the same way. Not saying that they necessarily should be found guilty or not, that's for someone else to decide, a proper tribunal to decide, but they should at least be prosecuted and treated in the same way. Or not, and as an advocate of free speech, perhaps we should have prosecuted neither, and Lucy Connolly should not now be in prison. But speaking of not prosecuting, there's a slight update to my video yesterday about the police not prosecuting Kneecap for the comments "Kill your MP," because somebody on X implied that it was disingenuous to say that they decided not to prosecute them and instead it was just the time limit. Well, I'll revert anyone that says that or thinks that back to this comment here. The statement from the police about this said as follows: "A thorough investigation has now been completed by detectives from the Counter-Terrorism Command, which included interviewing an individual under caution and seeking early investigative advice from the CPS. A range of offences were considered as part of the investigation. However, given the time elapsed between the events in the video, which I think was 2023, and the video being brought to the police attention, any potential summary-only offences would be on the statutory time limit for prosecution, which is 6 months. But then they go on to say relevant indictable offences, which has no time limit, were considered by the investigation team, and based on all the current evidence available, a decision's been made that no further action will be taken at this time." So it is not disingenuous to say that they decided not to proceed with any, because they could have done, because they did consider certain offences. And I can say, again, either we prosecute them all that are on the face of it open incitement to violence, or we don't, and we uphold free speech. Now, I'm an advocate of free speech. I would rather we uphold free speech, but here we are. If we prosecute one, we should prosecute them all. That is the only way we have a completely fair system, and that it is not, at least on the face of it, a two-tier system, which I understand people don't like it to be said, but you can understand why people think that it's a two-tier system when some are prosecuted and some are not, when some are just as clearly incitement as others. So with all that said, moving on, let's look at some more rather scary headlines, such as this one here. The UK must actively prepare for potential war in the homeland. And some people are naturally worried whether we can be forced into conscription. I'll come back to that in a moment, and what you might actually need to think about if this all does play out. But as a word from one of my sponsors, don't go away. Now, just as an aside for a moment, you've heard me talk a lot about the dangers of somebody impersonating you and taking out loans in your name and this kind of thing. But what happens if there is a data breach and your data is among that data breach and that it might end up on the dark web? Well, here's what you do about that, because one of the reasons I partner with NordVPN on this channel is not only does it provide as a virtual private network a secure and anonymized IP address through which you get DNS filtering, meaning it filters websites that you visit and downloads to make sure that they're not malicious, but it also has what they call the dark web monitor, as you can see on screen here. Now, if your information's been caught up in a data leak and ends up on a dark web, that's the bit of the internet that isn't really indexed by search engines, not to get overly complicated about it, but if your data ends up there and then it's available to hackers and all that sort of stuff, then this can alert you that your information is there. And it points you to collections of leaks of data, and you can go and change the password, change the data, or even close down the accounts to make sure that they are completely removed. Because if your data, i.e. your email and your password, is on the dark web somewhere, then they can go to your accounts, log in, and you may have forgotten about these. But when you log into those accounts, they could have your address, they could have payment details, and all sorts of things. So there could be lots of these accounts that you've forgotten about, maybe a fitness app or something that you've forgotten about years ago, but your data might end up leaked. You can see that it's there. The hackers might be able to get in and find out lots of information about you, but NordVPN has a dark web monitor that allows you to go there and remove that data. That alone is worth the money. And because I'm a partner with NordVPN here on my channel, you get 4 months extra free, plus 30-day money-back guarantee if you change your mind. But the price of a cup of coffee to secure your data is absolutely worth it. So you can visit nordvpn.com/BBB. The link is on screen and in the description below to get your 4 months free with a 30-day money-back guarantee to change your mind. But with the peace of mind, and if you do see data that is leaked somewhere, you'll be glad that you did so. So thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video and for keeping you all safe. So let's take a deeper look at this article, shall we? Because this, on the face of it, is quite scary, and you might think we are on the brink of war, at least with the amount of headlines that we're bombarded with. I'll show you a couple more in a moment. It says the UK must actively prepare for potential wartime scenario in the homeland. The National Security Strategy is warned. So it's the first time in years that such an event's been considered. They're reviewing and highlighting Russia and Iran and potential threats, etc. But then that's not the only headline. We've got this one here as well, saying Europe must be ready to build millions of drones to defend itself against possible Russian attacks. And then we have this one, millions of UK households issued a World War III survival kit warning. Now, I have to be honest and admit that I have been building up my survival kit with torches, and I've done all the research of little things that I would think we absolutely have to have. For example, DJI power bank, which is over there. Different bits of equipment. I'll put them all in an Amazon affiliate list, which I'll link below. You can go and shop through those. And they are things that I genuinely think we would need in the case of an emergency. So please do go and check those out. But another headline here, emergency alert to be sent to every UK mobile phone. The government's to send an emergency alert, taking over the screen with a loud siren. This is the scheme that was set up in 2023. Which, as I recall, was less than a total roaring success. But while all that's going on, we've got Keir Starmer trying to say that he's lost grip on Labour's welfare revolt due to his focus being on foreign affairs. Is he seriously suggesting that he didn't know what was going on in Parliament because he was abroad? Because when I was in China, I still brought videos to you here on the UK events from China, which was 7 hours difference and 5,000 miles away. So I don't really buy that as an excuse. So now let's talk about the issue of conscription. First of all, is it possible? Yes, but it's obviously not that simple. More about that in a minute. Is it likely? Well, in my view, the short version, no. And the longer version? No, I don't think it is. And I'll tell you why. Currently, we have no conscription legislation. There is no current law that allows mandatory military service in the UK. The National Service Act of 1948, which governed peacetime conscription from 1949 to 1960, is no longer in effect. So this ended then and there. And apart from Rishi Sunak's somewhat last-ditch attempt to garner some kind of favour, which backfired massively, I don't think any government policy is going to seriously suggest conscription either. Each successive government, including the current Labour government, have consistently said that there are no plans to reintroduce conscription. It's been hinted at from time to time, I think just to test the waters, but I don't think that was particularly serious. So I really don't think that there is the appetite and the policy to do this. Plus, the Civil Contingencies Act of 2004, Section 23, explicitly, at the moment, prohibits the government from using emergency regulations to require any person or enable any person to be required to provide military service during a state of emergency, effectively barring conscription through that mechanism unless there is specific law. So that is the much longer version. It would require new law, which means it would require a bill. It would have to go through the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and we'd probably have this ping pong again. And ultimately, that would firstly take a long time. It would be too slow in any event. If it was in response to some kind of tragedy or emergency, it would take too long, albeit they could put through emergency legislation like COVID, but I just don't think that's going to happen with conscription. That is my honest view. I may be wrong, but that is my view at the moment. I don't think it's likely. It is certainly possible, but only with new legislation. But either way, let me know what you think about any of this. What are your views on conscription? What are your views on free speech? I think I get a sense of most of you, but let me know in the comments. Do subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.